Let's try that again. Good afternoon from all of us at the New Haven Pride Center, and I hope that you're enjoying our Trans Awareness Week programming. My name is Carly Webb. I'm a journalist and activist and a proud member of the New Haven Pride Center. And all this week, we will be having a lot of programming leading up to Transgender Day of Remembrance on Friday, November 20th. And among that is a discussion we're going to be having for the next hour, centering around intersectionality, being Black and being trans today. Joining me in this discussion are two Black and trans leaders in our community. And we're going to bring them in right now. Among the first, Raven Aurora Moulton.
Raven. I actually spelled my name wrong now that I realize it.
Raven has joined us. Raven just joining us in. And Raven, introduce yourself to the people.
My name is Raven. I work at the Family Advocacy Center in Hartford. I am a victim advocate for trans women of color and a public ally for the North End Hartford region.
We also have another guest coming in a minute, but we're going to get going here. And Raven, with the work you're doing, this first question is very apropos. In one thing that we hear a great deal about is that the face of transgender America is often largely white and middle to upper class. Yet 2 years ago, the UCLA Williams School of Law did a study on who is trans in America, and they found that of the transgender population in this country, 16% are Black. With that in mind, in your mind, what's the biggest issue facing Black transgender people right now?
People murdering us. That's the biggest issue right now. Not to be so blunt, but it's a fact that Black trans women die by the age of 35, which it's great when you live past that, but for the statistic to be that short of a lifespan, our biggest issue is being killed.
Now, just talk about that a little bit. As far as the violence, in your mind, what has been the genesis of this? Where is it coming from? And in a sense, we're just going to get real right now. Where have trans communities been asleep at the wheel? And where has, I'll say it, cisgender Black family been asleep at the wheel as well?
You're asking a loaded question right now. It's okay though. I'll do my best to answer. Let's break it down. I'll start with the cisgender Black family. How do I put this? Black people aren't conservative, generally speaking. We're not running to the Republican offices and voting for Trump's again. Not many of us, not all of us, but generally speaking, we're not conservative. But when it comes to certain things, on the history of Black people, we are on that level of religion. We are very conservative religiously. And I'm not saying every Black family, my family wasn't in church every Sunday, but when it comes to the LGBT situations, somehow you can go from a family that's not religious, and all of a sudden, if you have someone who's LGBT in your family, they become the most religious zealots out there. So it's not, I don't know the best, but again, this would have been good if I had the questions earlier. But yeah, it's not a direct, we're all raised to hate LGBT people, but just the way history has gone, specifically in terms of religion, Christianity, for the Black household, that's what kind of dictates how the Black family treats the LGBT child. And it's something they have to, as a whole, kind of learn to overcome, because not every Black family, not every Black person feels so strongly. But because of the way that they've been processed to understand anyone who's LGBT as being completely different from them, completely different and separate. So I guess in a little way, kind of segregated from the cis Black experience. Kind of makes
Now,
sense. That was a lot, and it was like all over the place. But
well, actually,
kind of,
let's talk. Let's get into that a little bit. In your experience, what led you to come out?
um, to be honest, I've always been me, and I know that's a very like vague statement, but like when I transitioned, it wasn't me learning to be feminine. It was just me changing what I wore. And honestly, going back to when I was like high school age, freshman to like senior year, the stuff I bought was women's stuff, women's clothes, women's underwear. It wasn't like I was actively pursuing any type of masculine identity. I was just doing what I felt was normal. So, and I know for the average trans person, that's not like the norm, but I also didn't have an interest in masculine things, you know? So, I don't know. Even when I was younger, I had a friend, not really a friend, it was just someone I hung out with, who was like, you give me this like feminine vibe. And I'm just like, how? I'm just kind of existing, you know? Like, it wasn't because I was doing anything like watching them do anything different or like doing anything myself that was different. It was just, sorry, I hear background noise. But, it was just me being me. And over time, I became more of myself and discovered my own identity, as everyone else does as you get older. Um, yeah.
Now, how do those experiences affect the work you're doing now?
The so the experience of learning my identity or the interaction between family and my identity.
About all the above.
Oh, you're asking these broad questions. um, I talked about just my identity. So I'll focus on that for a little bit. Actually, I guess I have to kind of combine the two, so family and my identity. So growing up, I've always, like I've said, I've always been the way I am now. There was no transition to a different version of me. It was just always this. So growing up, I had an uncle who was my uncle and my mom both were self-admitted bullies. Prior to ever me existing, it was just that's just what they were. They were bullies when they were growing up, and they were bullies as adults. That's just how it kept going. So when I came to about and my actual personality started to show up, my uncle would beat me, and he thought that was the way to get me to be more like a man. And it's not. Don't beat your kids. Don't allow for someone else to beat your kids. And if your kid's telling you, "Hey, so and so is hitting me," don't take that as a minor situation. Whether there's bruises or not, that's a big deal. But um I had that situation, and then every time my uncle was around, it was kind of the same situation where he would beat me. And then the only person who was really there for me was my grandmother. And today, even to today, my grandmother is like my biggest hero in my life, even though she's not still protecting me. In a lot of ways, I guess I emulate her in her style 30 years later. But yeah, my grandmother was my biggest support growing up. She also so there's a lot to explain right now. So growing up, my grandmother lived with me and my mom because when my mom was younger, she was a drug addict, and when I was born, that same year she got clean, and from that point on, she just always lived with me and my mom. So my grandmother's always been a part of my life. Um, that
But
being
Raven,
said,
but Raven, how is that affecting the work you're doing in advocacy now?
it comes
how do those
together.
experiences mold you?
Hold on. This is why I wish I had the questions earlier because I could have like summarized all my ideas and thoughts at once. But long story short, how it relates. My grandmother was, like I said, my biggest protector. So as I got older, the person I wanted to emulate, the person I wanted to be most like, was my grandmother. So when I first got into this advocacy stuff, the main point that I wanted to get across was I wanted to be the parent that I didn't have growing up, which that parent for me, more or less, because my grandmother's still my grandmother and my mom still had full control because, again, I'm her child, not my grandmother's. I wanted to be a version of my grandmother, but the parent version. Kind of makes sense?
No, that makes definite sense. We hear that a lot. And a lot of people I've talked to, he said, be the person that you wish you could have been when you were older. And now joining us from the backstage, Eliseo Acosta, our third member of the discussion, is here.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good,
Eliseo,
how are you?
introduce yourself to the people and welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Eliseo, he, him pronouns. I actually I have two jobs actually. The first one is doing data entry. The other one is working for Trans Lifeline. I like the Trans Lifeline work better, but anyways, yeah, that's a little about me.
Well, no, I'm going to pass the similar question I asked Raven. In your mind, what's the biggest issue facing Black transgender people right now, in your mind, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. I think one of them is just, I mean, it's always hard. Well, not always, but it can always be challenging to come out as trans. I think there's an added level to it when you add the fact of being, BIPOC, because there's the racial aspect to it too, which, not just racism, but also I feel like there's a certain pressure of being like a BIPOC person, like, so being like a Hispanic Black individual, before there were like certain stereotypes that I was being forced to fit into, and now there's a different kind of stereotype that I'm fitting into, and yeah, it definitely has its challenges.
Now, what led you to come out?
I mean, I initially came out, I guess, as trans almost a year ago now. Socially, I came out. I'd known I was trans since I was pretty young, but I grew up in a very religious household, so it wasn't like a safe environment for me to come out. So that's why I waited so long. And the reason why I came out was because I had kind of like broken away from my family, which was the reason why I wasn't coming out. So that's kind of like what prompted me. I was like finally free to be myself, basically.
Now, one thing, what are some experiences and this is for all of us, what experiences have you had that, what are experiences you've had that perhaps don't make it into mainstream conversations? In other words, we're going to talk about our white transgender brothers, sisters, and others for a second. What are some of the things that we deal with that they don't readily get?
Yeah. I mean, when you started talking about that, one thing came up to mind. I was looking for pictures of top surgery results because I'm kind of in the process of getting top surgery. And I wanted people that were similar skin tone as me, because like scars kind of like they heal different, but people who have more melanin. And I was in a group with probably the majority of the people were white, and they kept sending me photos, and I was like, I really appreciate everyone sending me photos, thank you, but I'm looking for BIPOC individuals because like we scar different, and I'm looking for somebody who's going to have a check
Hyperpigmentation
in more aspects than just like the surgery type. Like I'm looking for somebody who resembles me to see what I could possibly look like post-surgery. And they just were not getting it. And I just kept getting photos of white guys after top surgery, and it was very unhelpful.
Raven, anything to add?
Repeat the question one more time. Sorry,
no. What are some experiences that you deal with being a Black trans woman that, for example, especially like, for example, white trans women just don't wrap their head around, or that mainstream trans conversations don't touch on, and they should.
Okay, so I have a little situation that happened back in college, and this might be the experience of a lot of like people who do LGBT groups related to school or other things. I'm not really aware of everybody's experience, but I can only talk about my own. It's something I always say. Um, yeah, back when I was in college, I was literally the only person of color in all the LGBT groups, which was okay. The issue was I was also always singled out to why there weren't more people of color in the group. Rather than, like, talking to people in general about what they could do to include people, they just look to me for all the answers. I'm just like, I'm not every black person. I'm really not. Like, I can tell you what you could get me to join, but like, it's just me. We are not all the same. Everyone is different, no matter what color you are. So, to have a group full of white people looking at me to answer why there's not more black and Hispanic people in the group, maybe you guys need to do more work to get out there and get it known that we are interested in other people's opinions. Because you're all looking at each other for answers. And I get that I am different in the aspect of skin tone, but like the reason I'm there is to build connections with other LGBT people. You know?
No, exactly. That's one of the, I mean, that's something I find a great deal is I find a great deal in a lot of the discourse is that people ask the questions when they're around them. People ask the questions when they're around themselves. Then they bring one of us on and expect you to have all the answers when the fact of the matter is no. You need to be talking to a wide cross section of people. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It may be uncomfortable, but you know what? Being in this skin and being trans in this society, that's daily discomfort.
This is true.
In many ways, that's daily discomfort. So, in a sense, talk about for the both of you in your own lives. How much does the factor of being comfortable with being uncomfortable factor into your day-to-day existence?
A lot.
Yeah.
Well, elaborate for you. What has been for both of you? What has been the greatest thing about being all of who you are out in the world, and the hardest thing about being all of who you are out in the world?
The greatest thing? Being authentically me. Not hiding any aspect of my personality or what I'm into or anything above, because it can get really weird. But yeah, being authentic to myself and others, so we're all on the same page. The hardest thing. Hey, what were you gonna say?
No, go on.
What were you gonna say?
I wasn't going to say anything.
No. The hardest thing was, I don't want to say coming out, because it wasn't necessarily coming out. Existing, and this sounds really privileged, and it is. Existing in a world where I'm more so passable than others. So, like, trying to wrap people's minds around me being trans, and like then they're confused about what that means because they see me as feminine, so clearly I'm the opposite of what I am. I'm just like, no, take it as what I'm telling you. I call myself a woman. I am a woman. Simple as that. You know what I mean?
I do. Eliseo, how about you?
Kind of similarly, the best part about it, I guess, is just being able to be myself and loving myself just the way that I am. I had a lot of so the area that I grew up in was very white, like that, like there was hardly anybody who resembled me for many different reasons. But like skin tone was one of those. And so I just grew up kind of with a lot of like internalized racism, because I grew up thinking that like white was beautiful and everything else was like not, or like just not as good. But like I've come a long way and I've definitely grown out of that, and especially recently. And I guess I've just come to really embrace who I am, embrace my culture, embrace my skin tone, embrace my hair, embrace everything that it means to be a Black trans man. And as far and what was the other part of that question again?
No, actually, you answered both ends of it. What has been what's been good about bringing your whole self into the world? What's been difficult or challenging about bringing your whole self into the world?
Yeah.
I mean, I can not, but that's also something to talk about. That the very tricky intersectionality of being who we are as Black trans people in this society, having to deal with whiteness. How have you stumbled over that? How have you managed to work through that? How have you dealt with it?
Acknowledging it's an issue. I had a lot of bad experiences in college, and dealing with the LGBT group on the college campus I was on was one of them. There was one day this guy was complaining about his family situation, and I don't remember exactly what I told him, but he basically told me my experiences weren't as valid as his because I just have a crazy Black family. And I'm just like, well, that makes me not want to be here. Clearly, you have some issues you need to work with in terms of race, and that's not my field. That's not what I'm supposed to be here for. I'm supposed to be connecting with you, not feeling like I'm segregated from you, you know? I say you know a lot, by the way.
Well, I'll admit it's something I've stumbled over a great deal. It's something all those intersections are things that I've dealt with as well. It can be a very taxing intersection. And also Ashley Evans ringing in here, and that's a note, folks. You watching in the audience can be a part of this conversation. In fact, we want you to. If you have questions, in class we have a lot of non-Black students advocating for gender neutrality language. I'm cis female, so I want to understand the trans aspect. Well, Ashley, that's a good. Well, I'm just wondering, since Ashley put it up there, let's talk about for those who may not know, what are a few things that if you don't know, here's some things you need to know. And we're going to go with Elise. Actually, I want to go with Eliseo first on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is asking somebody what their pronouns are. I feel like that's kind of glossed over, and everyone is kind of used to assuming things, but I think we can't do that anymore. We can't assume somebody's gender. I mean, a lot of people assume that I'm male, and that works for me because I am a male. But somebody who looks like me that's non-binary, or somebody who looks like me that's a trans female, and they're getting like all these like wrong pronouns thrown at them, that's just triggering. That's trauma now, and that's not something that anybody should have to deal with. So definitely like asking pronouns and like respecting that.
And Raven, you said be respectful.
Yeah, I said be respectful.
Now, one thing I want to throw out there is understand that estrogen can do some really nice things. One thing it does not do is turn you white. That's for the Black folk in the audience. But overall, understand. But also, understanding for me, it's an understanding that that transness doesn't negate all the other things I have to deal with in society. It oftentimes emphasizes them even more. And I want to talk about that. I'm going to throw a sentence at you. This is something that a relative told me when I came out. Transgender, that's white people shit. Care to comment?
Wow.
It's not, though.
Yeah, I feel like that's really closed-minded.
It is. Going back to the religious aspect, because believe it or not, I don't know if you guys know this, but before Christianity came to Africa, the whole LGBT thing wasn't an issue. Like it really wasn't nearly as an issue as it is today, and it's not directly because of Christianity. And I'm not saying anything bad about Christians at all. I'm just saying, like, the religious context and the way that it was perceived back then is still not as bad. Let's make that clear. It's not as bad, but it's still relevant today. Just like slavery. These issues are not that we're still in slavery, but like, although if you think about the kids in the cages right now with the whole ICE situation, we're not that far from it. But it all relates. I know it seems like they're two different issues because one is the issue of color and the other issue of gender identity, but there's a lot of crossovers between the two.
Now, one thing also is a part of that, because both of you, in fact, everyone here in this discussion, in one way or another, is working on some type of advocacy project in regards to our trans community. How much of your Blackness do you feel you can bring into that work? And when you are amongst your own, just in a social setting or in a setting away from that work, how much of your transness do you feel you can bring into that? And how do you make that balance?
That's a good question.
I mean, I can go ahead and answer. So like I mentioned, I have two jobs. The first one, I work with, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming everyone there is cishet, and they do not know that I'm trans, and I don't intend on telling anybody that I'm trans. And as an FYI, I am a stealth trans man, so I don't really come out as trans to many people, if at all. But I also feel like if I were to come out as trans at my work, it would not go well necessarily. And the reason I say that is because I've definitely had some encounters with some of my coworkers where they haven't been necessarily the most trans accepting. Because with the forms that I deal with, there is a section there for sex and there's male, female, other, that which I would love for that to be modified, but that's the way that it is right now. And if anyone presses or like checks off the other box, and I put it in that way, they'll come over to me and be like, why is it other? Like, are they male or female? And I'm like, neither. Like, that's a valid option, and that's how we need to be addressing this person. But they'll just automatically, again, assume male, female, and be like, oh, this female person is here and this male person is there or whatever. And it's just kind of like, it's just very binary, and it's very like, you look this way, then you're that, and you look this way, then you're that. And that's not something that I agree with. And so I kind of wonder how I would be treated if they knew that I was trans.
They, them.
Yeah.
No, following up to that, how in effect do you balance, how do you go about the decision process of choosing and picking your battles within that space?
Yeah, well, so actually, me and my partner both work at the same organization, and we're both kind of advocating for that, for the paperwork to change so that it's more like accepting of trans individuals, because right now it says sex, male, female, other, and it would be better if it were gender related, because the sex is very irrelevant to the work that we're doing.
It is.
And so it would like, I don't know why it's on there at all, to be honest. And yeah, it would just be a lot more affirming and better if it said gender and it involved more than just male, female, other. If it was like male, female, non-binary, trans, etc. But that's in the works. But it's definitely, I'm glad that I'm in this organization, because even if I don't ever come out as trans, I can at least advocate for the well-being and the health of trans individuals.
No, Raven, you had something to add?
A lot, sort of. I'm all over the place always. I'll be honest about that. But interesting short topic about being stealth. Oh, I guess it does relate. Huh. So, at my job that I just left, I was actually stealth the entire time. I was there for like almost a year and a half. And the reason I chose to be stealth is because I work with mental health. And believe it or not, people with mental health issues are not fans, for the most part, are not fans of people who are trans specifically. Because we are just a whole other breed of just like complicated for them, and it doesn't make them happy. Trust me, I've sat through multiple conversations where they're just like, they've said very, very insensitive things towards anything LGBT.
With that in mind, I have a question from Olivia Gray. Thanks for the question, Olivia. I'm a social work student. So my question is, how can social workers be better about advocating for and serving the Black trans community?
I went to school for social work originally. So, that code of ethics they have, take it seriously. Where you gotta meet people where they are and honestly, just respect people. I've had a lot of conversations in the last like 2 months where it's just like people are trying to come around and understand trans and gender fluid identity, but there's still that like disconnect. So, for instance, not to go completely off track, because I really don't mean to, but I was just in a meeting with the Connecticut needs assessment for LGBT people, and it was going great. We created this whole like database for like trans and other LGBT needs, and it was cool. And then we got into a meeting with Connecticut shelters, and it just all went downhill from there because apparently they're hiring people who are not capable of being respectful towards gender nonconforming individuals, which isn't cool because they need help too. They need shelters as well. And to be mistreated by the person who's paid to be there, along with the people who live there, that's just creating another hostile environment that they probably just left. And then, along with, and I'm not going to name specific names at all, but a specific domestic violence shelter in the area that I'm in, where, yeah, they have resources for trans people, but like, if you're trans, you can't go to the domestic violence shelter. They'll give you a hotel room now, and like, I mean, a hotel room's great, but if you need to get out now, you kind of have to plan that very well. Versus being able to go to the shelter, where if you just got beat, you can go right there. And then also the other issue that I had with the hotel room, there are no resources in that hotel room. Like, it's in a hotel. There's no one there who's like, hey, what do you need? It's just you in a hotel room, and then chances are you're going to have to go right back to the situation you're in. So, people, again, are slowly coming around, but there needs to be that general level of respect, that general level of meeting people where they are, that general level of understanding that everyone is different. There are lots of LGBT people in the world. To try to make a bigger issue for trans people makes no sense to me. And that's because trans people, just because they're trans doesn't mean that they are trying to have any sort of sexual intercourse, relationship, or anything with the gender they were born as. That's just not the case. There are trans people who are straight, trans people who are gay, there are trans people who are lesbian, there are trans people who are bisexual, all of which should not matter when it comes to meeting your own needs or meeting that person's needs, because it just shouldn't, in my personal opinion. But again, I'm going off track. Back to what we were talking about.
But a lot of it comes back to, again, just gaining knowledge. That's what just seems like there's so much. That's one thing. I mean, first let's talk within our own communities. How, in your mind, scale of 1 to 10, one means it's just a crack on the street. 10 is the Grand Canyon. How big is the knowledge gap as far as trans people in the constituencies you run in?
There is like no knowledge at all, no knowledge at all. And I think that like that's what came up for me when that question was asked. Is I don't know much about social work, but if it's anything like any other organization, there's absolutely or next to no knowledge on trans individuals. I think everyone needs to be educated, because either people are making opinions on something they know nothing about, or they don't have an opinion, and honestly both are dangerous and both are ill-informed. And so the first step is to educate people, and so that people know what it means to be trans and what it looks like to be trans, because often people don't have the right idea.
Quick follow-up on that. Biggest myth you've had to debunk about your identity to someone close to you who did not know?
Honestly, I've had a lot of issues with people outing me as trans, and I didn't think that was something that I would have to explain, because you don't out your gay or lesbian or bi friend, but somehow
you totally don't.
And I'm like, what's up with that? Like obviously, like if anything, I think that it's almost worse, because I'm over here trying to be stealth. Like I'm trying to pass as a cis person.
And trying to exist
all these people know
in the
that
world as a normal
without my
person.
consent or without my knowledge even. And like that's not okay. That's not cool.
Oh, I get it.
It's happened so many times.
And yeah, I can commiserate with that one. Just the whole boundary. It just seems like people here, the minute you're trans, all of a sudden it's like all your boundaries can be violated at will.
You're a showcase, almost like a circus, a walking circus, which is not right.
Exactly. And speaking of the walking circus, there's something I do want to hit on, because both of you have mentioned that you both are partnered. So let's talk about the walking circus of dating. When you were out there single, how hard was it?
Do you really want to have this conversation?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. There's tea in this squeeze bottle. Let's spill some of it, shall we?
Some tea. I need more than tea.
Well, I have a bottle of that too, but we're gonna save that for afterwards. But
sure.
no, that's one of the things that's hard. I mean, I will say that as the only person on this stage who is not partnered at the moment. Yeah, I'm dropping the hint.
You want to trade places?
I'm thirsty.
I'll trade. I will trade
now. But let's talk about that, because that's one of the places I find that boundaries get trampled over the most is interpersonal relations.
Before we get on that topic.
Okay.
So, there's many reasons why I don't associate with my mother, but one of them is, like I said, I am very passable in real life. Like, I'm only 4'11". I got lucky. Not trying to like make it seem like I don't acknowledge that privilege, but like there's a lot of things about me where, like, I'll be honest, I haven't had any surgeries, but I can fit a D cup. That's just what it is. But if I go anywhere with my mother, she will go out of her way to let people know that I am her son. And I'm just like, this puts me in a situation that's not safe. And you're okay with this. That's the opposite of what a mother should be doing. Like, what's between my legs should not dictate how you introduce me to the world. Like, it shouldn't.
That also filters into what I'm asking about. Is in a lot of ways. I mean, we can even go beyond dating just to how frustrating is it for you to be in a situation where cis people just have no chill. They don't respect the agency and the autonomy. We're just going. That could be a good T-shirt. Cis people just have no chill. How has that been frustrating for you? How have you been able to negotiate through it if you have?
It's been difficult for me getting people to like acknowledge, and I guess it's not my fight specifically, but it relates. Getting people to acknowledge that not all trans people, not all trans women, let's be specific, not all trans women want men. Like it's not a thing. They it's like it's interesting to deal with. I guess I am going to talk about the dating thing a little bit. It's interesting to deal with the men who find me attractive, both the men who do know and the men who don't, because again, I am passable and I realize that. The men who know, even though they know, their process of me is I am a man. So like they can't go anywhere public with me because they don't want to be seen with more or less a cross dresser. And I'm like, I'm not. Like there's a whole me transness and cross dressing are not synonymous for each other. They're two different things, which is why there's two different names. Just like saying gay and trans, it's not the same thing. Two different things, two words for two different things. You can be gay and trans, but just because you're trans doesn't equal that you are gay. You know?
You get, oh yeah, so you get a lot of that. Alicia, you were smiling there. I could see that you could see that grin from space. Something tells me you want to ring in on this. So the floor is yours. What you got?
Okay. I have a lot to say about that. Yeah, I don't know what it is about. I feel like trans men also kind of get that sometimes where I don't know if it's because a lot of trans men have defaulted to becoming stealth or something, or if it's just, I'm not sure what, but I feel like there's a lot of assumptions on the same plane of trans guys being gay. And I don't know if I'm just thinking about it too much or if it really does have something to do with this like patriarchal society that we're a part of, where it's like if I'm trans and I was born a female and females date males, then that means that me as a trans man means that I default to liking guys, which I have never liked guys ever in my life, ever. Ever.
I've never liked women.
And that's not to say that I ever won't or there's anything wrong with dating guys. Like by all means that's fine, but I'm not attracted to men, and it's kind of unfair that that's pushed upon trans men, along with slightly off topic but also kind of on a similar strain. I feel like a lot in media too, where there's a trans man in a show or a movie or something, at least now when I think of every trans actor in a movie or show, they're always gay. And I'm like, why are they gay? Is it because you're like trying to hit like both the trans and the gay side of the LGBT like acronym?
I've never thought about that ever. But you're right. You're totally right.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lack of representation for the entire community in general.
Yeah.
No, that's another thing that they hit on. How has the newly woke level of representation we've seen for trans people these last few years, how has it affected you and how do you feel about it?
I mean, I'm glad that there's at least some. But again, I wish that it was a little bit less. I wish that it encompassed more people instead of just always kind of, it seems to always be hitting the same marks, if that makes sense. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I feel like it's good that there's representation, but it's always the same representation is what I'm saying, I guess. And I wish that there were queer people that were also Black, or that were some other kind of BIPOC, because I feel like it's always white and they're often, I don't know. I think that there's a lack of representation still, even though there's some. I'm happy that there's progress, but there's still a long way to go.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I want to see more. I want to see more people that in a sense, I want to see more people that look like me, but I also want to see more people that live like me. I mean, for example, love Janet Mock to death, but love Laverne Cox to death, for example, love him to death. But when I look at them, I see an example of what could be, but I'm not seeing me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see somebody who, at one level, I want to see somebody who's not in that position of, okay, we got to show this image of glamour every 5 seconds to you, or we have to show this upper middle class, perfect, everything's fine face, or I've got to see endless tragedy porn. And that's something we're getting to in a minute. But I want to see people just, hey, this is me. I get up in the morning. I get up in the morning. I do my job, plural. I gotta go feed. I feed my cat. I run to the store. Get my box of Wheaties, my bottle of Gatorade. Run by the pharmacy. Get my Estradiol and go on with life. That sort of thing. I want to see it. I want to get to the point where it's like, you know what, where we can be like, I'm trans. It's Monday, in a sense.
Make it normal.
Until that, yeah, and just normalize it, yeah. But and that's another thing. I think within our own communities, we need normalization, especially to me within our own, because
wait,
at least
you just reminded me of something. So I'm in an open relationship. You guys generally know what that means, and part of me is just like, I remember why I don't enjoy them, and the other part's like, the guy I'm with is asexual, and like, I have kids. I'm not gonna go into too many details, but like, he's asexual, and I have kids, so like, it is what it is. But dealing with the men who are in the hookup culture, because I'm a Black trans person, let me be specific. Because I'm a Black trans woman, I can either be a drug dealer or a prostitute, nothing else. So I'm just like, okay, perfect example. This guy messaged me one night, right? And we've been talking for a while, we just never met. And he's like, I'm in your area. And I'm like, okay. Like, whatever. And he's like, what are you wearing? And I'm just like, pajamas. Because I'm fucking normal. Like, I'm sorry, I don't wear lingerie to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I don't. I just so happen to have woken up at that moment. So he gets to my house and he's like, you're not even gonna like try to entice me? I'm just like, no. Like I'm not getting paid. I'm not doing that. Like, if we're doing this, we're doing this. We're not, we're not. It's like,
but that's an example of that knowledge gap that we're talking about, that people look at that. And I want to relay a personal story of my own, where I was out one night and this person comes up to me at 1:45 in the morning, and clubs in Connecticut close at 2. And this person has spent the entire night chasing after everybody else but me and getting shot down like an Iraqi fighter pilot.
Oh, you gotta love that. Gotta love
that. And finally decides to step to me. And I was like, and they're like trying to do everything to get you to come home. And at one point, he's like, well, what are some of your goals? It's like, well, and this person said, so are you in school now? Are you looking to go to school? I said, actually, I'm looking to go back. And he's like, well, good. You should finish. Not go to grad school. Not are you pursuing another degree. It's you need to finish.
Assuming the least.
And then also saying, well, we should go out. You should come home with me. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going home with some strange dude at 2 a.m. And also I have some place I have to be at 8 a.m.
No, exactly.
This person this person immediately assumed that you're meeting oh, well then bump that client off. This person actually said, I can offer double of what he's offering you. That is, yeah, wow.
Carly, not on the same level, but I have a slight funny story again, where this guy literally came to my apartment, right? He came to my apartment, came to my room, and he's like, "So do you work?" How would I have an apartment? Teach me something.
Everybody,
something new.
you're laughing, but that you may be laughing, but but these are the things you deal with. And also going quickly to something Alicia said, because we only have a few minutes left and want to get into some closing here. But one thing I do want to point out, because it's been in my head since you mentioned it, when everybody assumed trans equals gay, because that was my entire family when I came out to them. They're like, "Oh no, you're just gay. You're just gay. You're just gay." I'm like, well, and full disclosure, I am, just not the way you think I am. Just not the way you think I am. This was my mom at this point. Wait a minute. What do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I am a woman. I like women. And then at that point, it turned to what I call the human Microsoft blue screen of death. Smoke pours out of their ears and they just lose. It's like you just fried your motherboard. I think if there's one thing I want to tell people, especially within our own communities and our own families, is get the identity piece down first before you start worrying about who I like or don't like. I think that's in general for a lot of cis people who don't know. It's like, no, handle one thing at a time. First, just get through listen and learn the identity piece. I think actually for a lot of people, it just comes down to listen. And when you're dealing with Black, Indigenous people of color who are also trans, listen even more, study even more, because there's a lot of these cleavages going into my life. Since we're coming around to the home stretch and pulling into the station, though, for yourself, what is the most important advice you received in your journey? And what is the most important advice you've given or want to give to others who are like us, who may be looking ahead at their journey?
Alicia, you go.
Wait, I'm sorry. Would you be able to say that again?
Okay. Being Black trans folks in this society and having to deal with it, what's the most important piece of advice you've gotten in your journey forward? And what's your advice you'd give to that person whose egg is just cracked, who looks like you, to power them on their journey? And Alicia, I want to start with you.
Okay. I think that my advice would be the same for both. And it would be, don't ever assume anything. And when I say that, I mean, when you come out as, so like, I'll talk about somebody who's like myself, a Black trans man. Don't ever let somebody assume anything about you because you're a Black trans male. Don't let them assume that you like certain things or that you dislike certain things or that you act a certain way, talk a certain way, none of that. Just because you have this identity, this, you know, I don't know, these words associated with you, that doesn't define who you are. It's just a part of who you are. And I guess that's what my advice would be, is to not don't let anybody say who you are. Just let you say who you are and have your identity be your true identity. And live the way you want to live.
I need to write that down. Yes. Raven, same question. Most important advice you received coming out as you are. And what advice would you give someone who is trans like you, woman like you, Black like you, whose egg is just cracked and they come to you?
Honestly, I never had anyone give me advice. But the advice that I would give someone else, men aren't worth it. There are a lot better things in the world. But also, short thing, because I do want to talk about the things I do at the Family Advocacy Center. So quickly, I'll run through it and let everybody know. Is that okay?
Go right ahead.
Yay! So, at the Family Advocacy Center, which actually does support majority of Connecticut, so it's not just a Hartford area thing, by the way. If you're a victim of crime, gender nonconforming, trans, whatever it may be, we do forensic experimental trauma interviews, which is something for people with developmental disabilities. Not just them, but it helps with giving forensic interviews for people who are adults who don't want to deal with cops directly. So if you're someone who's a victim of crime, you call us, set up an interview, and we'll go through this experiential trauma interview with you. And through that, we can submit that paperwork to the police department for you. If you so choose, you don't have to go through the police. Family advocacy. We do referrals, community resources, updates on case statuses. Again, a lot of this is victims of crime related. Applying for public assistance and domestic violence intervention. Clients also receive assistance with applying for victim compensation, which, if you are a victim of crime, there is the victim compensation for Connecticut. You can get literally money back from whatever was damaged, destroyed, whatever. Connecticut will pay you back for it, not the perpetrator themselves, if you qualify. The last thing I'm going to talk about, because again, I'm just doing this really quick, we do crisis counseling, court advocacy, and accompaniment. So if you're going through the court process over a crime someone has committed against you, we will go with you. We do psychoeducational support groups, assistance applying for victim compensation, again, the thing I just talked about, basic emergency needs, community resources, mental health referrals, home visits, and case management. If, again, you're a victim of crime and have an interest, our phone number is 860-714-5864. Really quick.
And Raven, you do a good job of it, and I'm proud to be a supporter of the efforts you're doing. And Alicio, I'm proud to be a colleague of yours, because awesome. I'm also a staff operator for Trans Lifeline, so I'm proud to be a colleague of yours. And to answer that question, and then send us on home, very much like Alicio, I have it with both the advice I've gotten, the advice I've given are the same. Know who you are, know who they are, and know what time it is. And who we are is Black, trans, fiercely and wonderfully made and proud. Whether the egg just cracked, whether you've been at your transition for 20, 30, 40 years, whether you had the opportunity to transition in high school and college or even earlier, or you transition later in life like myself, you know who you are and you know who they are. And some of them are going to be against this. Some of them don't know. In fact, most of them don't know. And when you have the opportunity to educate, we take it. But what time it is, especially for our Rainbow family, it's time to come together and it's time to learn what you don't know, listen to the things you haven't heard. Because like I say often, conversations like these are not just conversations, they're community self-defense. Alicio, Raven, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Thank all of you out there for joining us. And also a quick reminder, if you like the programming that you've been watching today, the earlier panel that we had on being trans in the workplace, your New Haven Pride Center has done a Herculean task since March, especially with the beginning of this coronavirus crisis. And right down at the bottom of that screen, newhavenpridecenter.org/match. Right now, we're trying to get a fundraising drive and with more on the 8, Patrick Dunn, you step in here. You could do this better than I could. But the point is that your Pride Center has not only asking for your donation, in many ways they've earned it. Patrick?
Well, I don't know if I can do it better than you, Carly, because you're one of the heart and souls of the New Haven Pride Center. And I just want to thank you and thank our incredible panelists for being here today, lending your voices and really elevating the really important conversation that we need to be having, which is the intersectionality of gender identity, sexual orientation, and racial justice. These issues are extremely intertwined, and we as a community need to have more of these kinds of conversations. So I am here just to say that the New Haven Pride Center, we are a nonprofit, and we are proud to use many of our dollars to pay local queer, trans, BIPOC artists and speakers to lend us their talents and their incredible wisdom on panels and in conversations like these, and in arts programs like we did on Sunday. And every donation right now that is made through December 31st is being matched one-to-one by a national grant that we were awarded. And so if you have an extra $1 or $2 or $5, we please consider going to our website, newhavenpridecenter.org/match, and get that donation matched one-to-one and help us raise the $25,000 we're trying to raise by the end of the year. And I'm going to go away and let you close us out, Carly.
Well, pretty much we've covered it. Alicia, Raven, thank you for joining me this afternoon. For all of you out there, thank you for joining us, and also knowing, thank you, Lindsay, for that. Coming from one of our top administrators and organizers here in the Pride Center, Lindsay Prembroke, and coming from our trans projects coordinator, Elliot Olson, saying we did a great job. That's some high praise. Thanks. Thank you both.
Thank you.
For all of us at the New Haven Pride Center, you have a great afternoon and have a great Trans Awareness Week, and stay tuned for more of our programming throughout this week, and be there for our Trans Day of Remembrance ceremony on Friday. Good night, everybody.